Hello and good evening to everyone joining in from India, and very good afternoon to those joining us from France as well. I'm Aditya. I'm a researcher here at the Takshashila Institution, and I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to this discussion on the relationship between India and France. On our panel today, we have the ambassadors of both countries. We have the ambassador of France to India, Ambassador Emmanuel Luna, and the Indian ambassador to France, Ambassador Javed Ashraf. Our panel is hosted by Lieutenant General Prakash Menon, the director of the Strategic Studies program here at the Takshashila Institution. I'll just say a word about Takshashila before we move ahead. The Takshashila Institution is an independent center for research and education in public policy. We're an independent, non-partisan think tank, and we are concerned with how India shapes the world and also how the world shapes India in turn. We're also focused on transforming how India is governed and exploring the intersections between technology, economics, and politics. I also want to thank the Consulate General of France right here in Bengaluru for working so hard along with us to make this series of events possible. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our host and my boss, Lieutenant General Prakash Menon. All yours, General.
Good evening to everybody and bonjour to people in France and Paris. But let me start by thanking the Embassy of France in India on behalf of Takshashila Institution for this initiative. And I would also like to welcome both of them, the Ambassador of France in India, Ambassador Emmanuel, and our ambassador in France, Javed Ashraf, who is an old colleague who I had the pleasure of working with. This is first in the series and is aimed to promote Indo-French cooperation through an exchange of ideas between individuals of the two countries. The fact that both the ambassadors are here is indicative that such an initiative has political patronage. And therefore, we consider this to be an event which we believe in and which has actually riding on a whole set of relationship which is a thread through history. In the introductory webinar, which is entitled Exploring New Frontiers in the Strategic Partnership, is to firstly catch up with what has happened so far. And how do we take this forward? Because it will be periodically followed up by interaction between scholars, experts, practitioners from multiple fields who will cover a whole plethora of subjects identified for exploration. Takshashila Institution is especially delighted to partner the Embassy of France in this venture because we are, unlike the majority of Indian think tanks and public policy schools, located in the technology capital of India, Bengaluru, which is also in the southern part of India. We particularly take pride in the distance we have from Delhi, and which we believe gives us a better view and probably a lesser unbiased one. But the south of India is also connected very deeply with our history with France. For historically, the French played their most significant and substantial role, especially in the 17th and 18th century, in south of India. Today, two of our panelists are ambassadors of their countries, and therefore it is not out of place to recall that the state of Mysore sent an embassy to France during the reign of Louis XVI. It was very favorably received, sparking an interest in Indian textiles and crafts. It inspired many French people to send aid to Tipu Sultan. Mysore, in turn, attempted to learn French science and adapt infantry tactics. And the French artillery and Tipu's rockets were inspired by the French and later copied by the British and used against France in the European continent, which just goes to show that the world is round. I would actually want to dwell on another issue, which is we have used the term partnership. We are taking forward a strategic partnership which actually India signed with France in January of 1998. We are in the 24th year of that partnership. Next year, we celebrate the 25th year of that partnership. But the word partnership sits quite well with India's relationships to many countries of the world. We find it more comfortable to adapt. And I must tell you that while I was the commandant of the National Defense College, I had taken a delegation to the NATO headquarters in Brussels. And I asked somebody, a Frenchman in fact, what do you mean by partnership? Can you explain this to me? And he used an analogy which I found very apt and interesting. He said, in France or in Europe, if you are going to be invited for a party, you'll probably get an invitation card which says Prakash, Menon, and partner. What it probably means is that if you're gay and you want to go to a gay party, you take your gay partner with you. But the central idea is a partnership means the importance of context, that you can be partners with many people depending upon the context. And India has found this a suitable description for its relationships that we have adapted. So we can partner nearly every country in the world, and that is why we have partnership agreements with so many. But with the French, it is a special one, and it is one of the oldest. So let me just state something which I think should be the key conceptual note of today's proceedings, which is, I think we begin by accepting that we do not know so much. But that does not mean that what we do not know does not exist. So the issue of exploring the frontiers is about finding out what we have not done so far. And I think we should first begin by hearing our panelists about all that water which has flowed down this bridge of strategic partnership since 1998 and what it holds in terms of promises and challenges for the future. So may I now invite Ambassador Emmanuel to actually take the screen. I would have normally said take the floor. So the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, General. Thank you for your wonderful introduction. Thank you to your colleague Aditya also for his kind words, and I'm delighted to be with you today to engage in this discussion organized by the Takshashila Foundation and to see again my colleague in Paris and my friend, Ashraf, which is doing a great job in Paris and greatly helping the relation between the two countries with dynamism and optimism. I'm delighted to be here. I'm delighted to be invited by your think tank, which is well suited for Bangalore, the city of Bangalore, where I was last week. It's open-minded, progressive, dynamic, exactly what the city full of energy is. So I'm really delighted and happy that we are able to organize, and thanks to our Consul General in Bangalore, Dr. Marjorie Van Bellingham, we're able to organize a full year of events with your think tank to commemorate the 10th anniversary of our Consulate General in Bangalore. That's going to be really exciting. We're going to have a live discussion. We're going to have a podcast, and we are going to be able to address many topics ranging from strategic affairs to digital innovation and obviously science, technology, and historical ties between our two countries, because General, you've been very articulate and eloquent about the ties. Our relation between our two countries is grounded on history, and you described very well some of this common history. I myself went to Mysore last week on a personal trip to check and to I've seen this wonderful part of our joint history. You reminded us about the French officers who, after the Napoleonic War, came to India to work alongside Indian rulers, and in many parts of India, also in Punjab or in Lucknow and in other places. But the story of Tipu Sultan was also an admirable one, and I was really moved by what I have seen. Thank you also, General, to remind us about the partnership, and I fully agree with you. These days, there's a tendency in international life, international relations, to use big words, to say that between countries you have a partnership which are global, comprehensive, futuristic, eternal, or whatever I know. But if partnership has a meaning, it's really between France and India. I mean, this level of trust, confidence. I mean, I can't see many equivalent in international life these days. I mean, and it's very robust. It's all-weather partnership in good and bad times, as friends should be, and it's also encompassing many and many new areas, because we constantly expanding this partnership. We go beyond military exercise, we go beyond defense procurement, we go beyond space, we go beyond digital, we go beyond now AI, and so on and so forth. We keep on expanding because we have such a strong basis of common values, democracy, the rule of law, belief in a multilateral rules-based order, and we also have common interests. And this is really key, and this partnership is really a cornerstone of the foreign policies of our two countries. Well, today, since I'm talking to South India, let me maybe focus my intervention before taking some questions on a few issues related to, first, how my country is engaging actively with South India as a priority. Let me also maybe say a few words, since talking to think tank based in Bangalore, more about the digital partnership, which will be crucial in the coming years. And then, since we're not far from the sea, let me also say a few words about the Indo-Pacific vision that our two countries share. First, South India. South India is really a priority. We are going to expand our presence in South India. We already have a strong investment. We have two consul general, the one you know in Bangalore and the one in Pondicherry, expanding also covering Chennai and all the region of Tamil Nadu. This is an important part of our activity. We have strong human links, human exchanges between the South India and my country. I mean, obviously, COVID had disrupted the flow of Indian friends coming to Indian friends coming to France. But let me just recall that pre-COVID, we had from Bangalore, our consul general would deliver roughly 55,000 visa a year, whereas our consul general in Pondicherry would deliver about 26,000 visa. South of India is also key for our business presence because we know, we're convinced that this is a hub for innovation. And many of our companies are really there. I'm not going to tell you all of them, but we have thousands, and some of them are huge employers. I mean, a company like Capgemini has right now in India, but mostly in South India, 150,000 workers, employees. This is huge. I'm not going to list all of them. Obviously, IT, yes. Obviously, also aeronautics in Bangalore. I mean, companies such as Airbus, Safran, Thales, and others are very, very active. And no wonder that France was the top foreign country at Aero India last week in Bangalore. I mean, this is a clear reflection of that total commitment by French companies in Bangalore and to manufacture in India, to also to fill this vision of Atmanirbhar Bharat. We are totally committed to that. We're totally committed. We want also to help South India to integrate the global value chain and build for itself self-resilient supply chains. We have great cooperation with the authorities. I must say we enjoyed that in South India also. We launched, thanks to our consulate, we launched last year France-Karnataka Strategic Economic Committee meeting, which is very helpful to give a push to join business and, if any, to solve any issues they would have. I must say that also on a personal note, I'm always very impressed by the quality of the institutions, of the universities, of the labs I see in Bangalore. And by now I have already made a few visits in Bangalore. The Indian Institute of Sciences obviously needs no introduction. It's number one in India. But I must say that we have great cooperation. Last time I visited the Indo-French cell for water sciences, and if you have in mind the magnitude of the challenge that we're facing on water, you understand that this cooperation is very strategic again. I also visited the Indo-French Center for Applied Mathematics. I mean, an area where two countries are really leading in the world. Just to give you a figure, in number of fields field medals, my country is really at par with the US. In history, we had 16 field medals, which is just as much as the US. So we are number one also, which is a clear indication of the quality of the education in France, and we'll be delighted to resume and to increase the cooperation in that area and to welcome more students for India as soon as we're done with COVID, which will be sometime in the coming months, hopefully as soon as possible. Must say on science cooperation, I need to have a special word for space. I mean, ISRO and its French equivalent called CNES have been partner for more than 60 years, and they have launched jointly numerous satellites, and they are keeping in that great spirit. They are operating jointly satellites for climate monitoring, and now together we're aiming for Venus, and we will give an end to India towards achieving its goal, which is a magnificent goal, to send a manned mission to space by 2022. Well, I think for South India, I've said 10% of what should be said, but I'm really convinced that our approach shall not be only Delhi-centered, and we should engage more and more with vibrant, lively, ever-growing South India, and that's really at the top of my action plan and my priorities since I arrived to India. Let me say a few words briefly now about the digital sector, because with a think tank based in Bangalore, that would be a mistake not to mention these cooperations. Again, our two countries are very bully, very ambitious in that respect. Be it for research, for innovation, or industry and production. I mean, this goes from big labs to smaller ventures, to startups. And you may not have that in mind, but my country likes to describe itself as a startup nation also. And but I'm sure Jawed can be very eloquent on that, because I know he has a keen interest for these issues. But let me just flag to you that France has a huge number of startups and some unicorns, and last year was number one within the EU in terms of fundings raised for startups, with a record amount of 5.4 billion euros raised by these companies. And we're also a driving force within the EU to integrate the digital sector and to have an efficient digital market and a strong, obviously, industrial base, because it's the core of our sovereignty. The cooperation between India and France in that respect is properly organized by a roadmap which was adopted by Prime Minister Modi and Macron, when Prime Minister Modi came to France last in August 2019, and he was a special guest for the G7. Basically, we have a common vision of what the cyberspace should be. It should be open, it should be reliable, it should be safe, it should be stable, it should be peaceful. We want basically a rules-based cyberspace, and what is obviously the goal is to achieve the right balance between security and privacy. Since we share this vision, I'm pretty confident that in the coming months and years, our two countries can really take the lead to promote this very constructive approach at the UN and to take lead initiatives. And we should seize the opportunity now, since we have a pleasure to be together in the Security Council. I mean, France has been a long-standing promoter of having India more in the council. I mean, actually, we've been all very clear about our support for a permanent seat for India in the Security Council. We think that the Security Council will never be efficient if it doesn't reflect today's balance of power, and that we need India, obviously. But since we can enjoy at least India with us in the Council for the next 2 years, I think we should really push on that also. I mean, as we did with a Christchurch call to eliminate terrorist and violent extremism content online, and we obviously will also hope that India will join in to implement the Paris call for trust and security in the cyberspace. Obviously, these are values, but underlying these values, we need a strong industrial cooperation if we want to be really autonomous and sovereign countries, and we can't achieve that only by ourselves. And that's why we have ongoing strong cooperation in the most strategic fields, which are supercomputing, quantum computing, artificial intelligence. We had a magnificent cooperation between a French company called Atos and your institutions called CDAC, the Center for Development of Advanced Computing, and together they have built 20 supercomputers to increase and boost India's capacity. The next stage of this venture should be exascale computing, which will be in the coming years key critical capacity. I mean, the US, China are putting huge amount of resources in this quest. I mean, none of our countries want to be a junior partner of either of these two powers, and that's why we really want to cooperate together to have our own capacity, and I'm quite confident that we're going to succeed. This is also, the spirit is also promoted by the French tech, and then I don't know if we have some members tonight to listen to us, but we have a huge French tech community that was launched 2 years ago, which is based headquarters in Bangalore, India, with more than 550 individuals which are really engaged in innovation. That's about what I wanted to say about digital innovation. Let me say a few words briefly about the Indo-Pacific. Indo-Pacific is the core of the partnership between our two countries right now. It's a concept that we share. It's a concept that was spelled out on our side by President Macron when he visited Australia in 2018 in a place called Garden Island. That was also a vision that was very much and very clearly said by Prime Minister Modi when he visited the Shangri-La dialogue around the same dates. And we really want to promote a rules-based multilateral regional order, free of any hegemony and in keeping with our values. It's an inclusive idea. It's a positive, and it's really a way to make sure that tomorrow's world will be in keeping with our values. Our values are very clear. I mean, and for this region, France, we value, we promote, we believe in a multipolar Asia and in a multipolar world. There's no issue about that. And it's a cooperative strategy. I mean, all partners are welcome. As you may know, we're working also with Australia, we're working with Japan, and it's really moving forward. It's yielding very positive, very concrete results. And we're cooperating also with a larger environment, and that's why we're very proud to have joined as a full member last year the Indian Ocean Rim Association, because we believe we're India's neighbor. We're also a power of the Pacific. I mean, we have a population in the region. We have more, which is a lot for us. We have more than 1 million people in the region, few for India, a lot for France. We have troops, we have bases, and we have territories. We feel really we are your neighbor. And to promote this vision, we have very far-reaching and very concrete cooperation. We share information. We were the first country to send a liaison officer to your IFC IOR center in Gurgaon. We have a long-standing annual exercise called Varuna together. We also recently undertook our first ever joint patrol of La Réunion Island, and obviously we have fruitful industrial cooperations, especially on submarines. Well, I've been very long. I just can say that there's a great level of trust between our two countries, and I'm confident that we're going to go even further in the coming years. And I really wish that South India will be a very good launching pad for this cooperation. Thank you very much for welcoming me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I think in a very short while you have actually described in the Indo-French relations, and you have also said that there are large areas for cooperation left. It is never sufficient, especially in a world which seems to be unhinged in many places because of the shift in global geopolitics. And I think any amount of cooperation between both our countries is insufficient. We should just search for more. And what should appeal to us is that despite the fact that there has been a difference in culture and language and even distance, the relationship has endured. It has only grown from strength to strength, and let's hope it will keep doing so. So before we get round to the next round, may I request my old colleague, Ambassador Javed Ashraf, our Indian ambassador in France, to take the screen.
Wait, can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yes, of course.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, General Menon. What a pleasure it is to see you here on screen and once again to share the space with you. Great, wonderful memories of our working together on some very critical issues of national security, and always valued your intellectual capacities, but also your strategic vision. And so I very fondly remember all that we've done together. Delighted that you are continuing with that in Bangalore, Bangalore, a city that is very critical to the realization of the aspirations and the ambitions of New India, in a way that the future will in pretty much be determined by the course that the extraordinary resources, talents, and assets that we have in Bangalore take in shaping the future of India. But for all the also important reasons that Ambassador Lenain just spoke about, and really Bangalore is at the heart of India-France relationship, in more ways than one, whether you speak of digital partnership or you speak of defense and security. So it's a great pleasure that you are doing this from Bangalore, from Takshashila Institute. And once again, it is a pleasure to really see my good friend, Ambassador Emmanuel Lenain, here today. Once again, a person who is setting a scorching pace in covering the diversity and the sheer geographical immensity of India, but also in a lateral manner by the way in which he's pushing the agenda, and a really broad-based agenda in all its dimensions. Once again, this particular initiative and this long series of events, podcasts, and seminars is again a reflection of this dynamism and initiative. Thank you for organizing this. I think it is very, very timely because our relationship, and in fact, if I were to simply say that, if we have strategic convergence between India and France, then the two ambassadors must have the same strategic convergence. And I run the risk of being both redundant and repetitive in what I say today. I should try to build on what my friend Emmanuel has said. But I'd say this, that our relationship has evolved from fundamentally a bilateral context to a regional and a global context. And it is coming at a time when we are witnessing dramatic, once in a generational, once in a moment of history changes taking place in the world, multiple transitions taking place at the same time. It is, of course, axiomatic today to begin by speaking about the post-pandemic world. But I think both the pandemic period and what we are witnessing as we try to step out of this pandemic is that the consequences are not merely in terms of the extraordinary toll it has taken of human lives and health, but also the economic, geopolitical consequences that will play out over a long period of time. In many ways, it has, in a sense, crystallized and accelerated the shifts, longer-term shifts that have been taking place in the world, enabled by technology and facilitated by the existing international order, and which, in a sense, is also causing the kind of stress that we are witnessing in the international multilateral order, as well as the eroding effectiveness and uncertainties that surround the multilateral process and the multilateral institutions. But we also see that in the trade and technology friction. We see that in the the negative economic sentiments growing around the international economic collaboration, but also in terms of the pressures that governments are facing at home and the impact it can have on domestic politics also. And so this is also a time when we are seeing Europe emerge as a pole. It always was a very strong economic pole in the world, but we are beginning to see the emergence of a strategic European Union and Europe as a strategic pole in the world, and contributing towards the emergence of a more multipolar global order. And so it is in this context that we see why France and India partnership is of particular salience, not just to our two countries, but also to the world. It is because, of course, is what Ambassador Lenain said, we are two democracies, we have common values, we have a deep abiding faith in strategic autonomy. There are not too many countries that use the phrase strategic autonomy. It's an article of faith in our foreign policy, and that has been a binding force for us, both in some of the most difficult moments over the past 2 or 3 decades. We are also deeply wedded to the process of multilateralism, and we are both important actors in the Indo-Pacific region, which is clearly where the center of gravity of global opportunities and challenges are shifting, and the course that the Indo-Pacific region takes will have a profound impact on the direction of the world in the 21st century and perhaps beyond it. And France, unlike any other European power, and perhaps also many others, is a resident power in the Indo-Pacific region. It has got territory, it has got a massive economic, exclusive economic zone, and of course it has people and vital interests in both in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean region. And so for all these reasons, as we look ahead, we have to also take into account that invisible asset that we have, an extraordinary degree of mutual trust and confidence And we only have to think back to 1998, when we stood in some degree of isolation from the world after we took our own sovereign decision to embark on the path of nuclear deterrence. But it was France that had actually at that point of time stood with us. And I remember Prime Minister Vajpayee's visit to where I also happened to be here at that point of time, to Paris in 1998. And those are things we don't forget. Those are moments that stay with us when we look ahead in these uncertain world of many transitions as where we can count on these friendships. So having laid the background to what I think is the imperative of a deeper India-France strategic partnership, I'd like to actually go into the future and see where we are trying to head. We've just come out of a strategic dialogue in January, which was led by the diplomatic advisor and the chief military advisor of President Emmanuel Macron and national security advisor on our side. And I can tell you, if we just, I wrote the bullet points of all the initiatives, proposals, processes that we are engaged in, and it ran into about 5 pages. And that just shows you the depth and the diversity of this relationship. It covers every aspect of our national endeavor: political consultations, defense, security, digital partnership, economic ties, and a regional and a global framework. But let me just deal a little more into the look into the future. First, let me start with what I think is critical to the aspirations and ambitions that we both have for the role that this partnership can play in the world. And to do that, we must do more with each other. The more we do with each other, the more we are going to be able to do with the world. It is already quite a big agenda. But where we are particularly going to be laying a great deal of emphasis on as we get into the future, one, of course, is on expanding our political consultations. We are already have a high level of political dialogue, but we are now going to be speaking more and more in very functional sense on specific issues and specific themes, and have more rigorous dialogues on diverse parts of the region. And this is particularly important when we speak of the global framework of our partnership. In the realm of defense, we already have a very strong relationship, whether we talk of sea or whether we talk of the air. But we are heading, and quite seriously, into a more long-term Make in India partnership, a collaborative effort that will be beneficial to France and beneficial to India. And so France is perhaps one of the few countries that are deeply committed to supporting our vision and aspiration with complete transfers of technology, with setting up complete supply chains and manufacturing facilities, not just in components and subsystems, but also in platforms. There are offers on the table, which we will, of course, be evaluating in accordance with our procedures. But another area is going to be cyber, and Ambassador Emmanuel has already spoken about it. But the cyber part also links into what I think will be critical to the future, which is communications technology. And so we are going to be working together, as he said, on not just on the cloud services, the artificial intelligence, the quantum computing and exascale computing, but also on 5G and 6G capacities. Because remember, in the future, or in this digital era, our digital capacities and leadership will be not just important for our economic fortunes, but also for our global position, sovereignty, leadership, and competitiveness. In this era, as often technology has been the principal determinant of power, competitiveness, economic progress, and prosperity in all ages of our history. So this is going to be a key area. We are also looking at space security, which is a new dimension to our growing and a very deep and long-standing cooperation in the realm of space. We will be doing more on counterterrorism together. I've had a number of meetings and we've had a number of exchanges, because we recognize today that this challenge of extremism, radicalism, and terrorism is not defined by geography, by specific targets, by specific groups. It is, in a sense, a boundaryless ideology. And today, with great tragic consequences, we sometimes see the intersection of the challenges which Paris faces or which Delhi faces. So this is an area whether we speak of analytics, whether we speak of real-time exchanges, or we speak of intelligence exchanges, is going to be a critical area of our bilateral cooperation. Ecological transition, we've just had Minister Barbara Populi in Delhi and Surat and in Assam. She had an extensive visit. And she laid out an extraordinarily rich agenda of cooperation in climate change, in environment, in biodiversity. And it is going to be important as we go ahead into the future. For example, in transportation, both India and France are doing a lot of work in hydrogen. And you know that when we speak of heavy transportation, fuel cells or batteries will not be sufficient. We'll need hydrogen-driven systems for heavy transportation. Again, an area of cooperation. And it is important not just because we want to achieve our national objectives and international commitments on climate change. It is also going to be important because if we master the technologies in this area, we will be among the economic leaders of the future as well. So over the next 20, 30 years, you're going to see these industries are going to be the key determinant of global economic competitiveness. And our partnership is going to be vital in achieving that. And of course, a part of this is the economic partnership is already pretty significant, sometimes not as visible and obvious given the strength of our economic defense and security partnership, but it is really significant. And I can see us doing more, and we will be in the coming days setting up the agenda for a much deeper economic partnership. From bilateral, let me move to the Indo-Pacific region. And in the Indo-Pacific region, frankly, as my colleague and good friend Emmanuel said, we have a great deal of convergence, and we articulated and enunciated our respective visions for the Indo-Pacific region around the same time in 2018. Now, what is it that we wish to achieve? First of all, neither of us defines it as a country-specific agenda. We define it in terms of its entire geographic entity. What we wish to achieve together going into the future is that India and France should be in a position to work together and with others to protect our security interests and our economic interests, to ensure that we are able to build a region in which there is a rules-based, international, law-driven, multilateral system. We want to be able to help other countries maintain their sovereignty and not be subject to either hegemony or be torn between great power rivalry. We want to build a region that is connected by secure seas, integrated by trade, and underpinned by rule of law. And we wish to be able to help other countries in the region have great capacities. Now, how do we achieve this? First, of course, is that we work at multiple layers. We work together, and whether it is in maritime domain awareness, whether it is for economic prosperity in the region, or whether it is for connectivity or for ecological sustainability. But we work with 4 other countries, and there is a range of countries we are looking at where we can work together to support their capacity, their ability to safeguard their sovereignty, their EEZs, and their vital interests. The third, we work with major powers in the region. Australia and Japan have already been said. We both believe in an open and inclusive and a balanced Indo-Pacific region, which means that we also believe in flexible geometries which intersect with each other, but with all driven by the same principles and same vision to enable the evolution of a regional architecture without necessarily having to put it down in some kind of a formal agreement across the region. And we are working in institutions. He mentioned IORA, we have Indian Ocean Commission, we have the Djibouti Code of Conduct. These are examples of the regional institutions in which we are working together. We also have a regional coordination. For example, we are going to be deploying someone in IMASO. They have deployed someone in the Information Fusion Center, IOC, in Gurugram. We are both present in Singapore. We are going to be invited to deploy someone in the Information Fusion Center in Madagascar. And when we create this kind of a web of information and intelligence sharing, we're much better able to not just safeguard our interests, but help other countries in the region do theirs as well. So it is a very, very comprehensive agenda on the Indo-Pacific region. And let me therefore go to multilateral cooperation. And once again, multilateralism is critical to both of us. We don't see ourselves as price setters or countries that think they can bend the world to their will, as some do. We believe that multilateral order is in some sense critical for our ambitions, for our aspirations, and consistent with our values. And also, in a sense, we are price influencers, so we would like to be in a position to work together and with others to strengthen and reinvigorate the multilateral processes and institution. As both President Macron and Prime Minister say, we are talking about a reformed and result-oriented multilateralism. Now, multilateral institutions and processes are distinct, and we are operating once again at various levels. We are, of course, going to be in the UN Security Council together. And France has been a great champion for India in the UNSC reforms process. And these 2 years will give us an opportunity both to work on immediate challenges and set strategic directions for the future. We are also partners in advancing the agenda of COP26 with climate change or biodiversity in COP15. These are just examples. But we also recognize that the future of multilateralism and the global faith in it will depend on how we deal with the challenge of pandemic. You cannot have a situation where today 75% of the vaccines have been accessed by people in only 10 countries so far. We want to be sure that we do 2 things together. One is that we are able to create a multilateral framework working together or sometimes in coordination, where there is equitable access to vaccines and where the economic consequences of pandemic are addressed in a manner that leave the poorer countries not more vulnerable than they already are. This is going to be very critical, both for geopolitical future of the world, as well as for the faith in multilateralism. We were going to be working together, of course, in reforming and revitalizing WHO. WTO is again high on the agenda. Cyber agenda and the global governance norm for the digital era. Space is emerging as an area of great priority. And there are areas of sea. We've got UNCLOS, but there is this jurisdiction, the vast area beyond national jurisdiction, where we have challenges, for example, of IUU fishing, where we need to work together, because this is not just an economic problem, it is going to be an ecological problem and eventually a serious geopolitical problem, even in the Indian Ocean region, for which both France and India have full cognizance, and we'll do all that we can to work on that. Looking into the future, of course, is to see that how we can build, as both President Macron and Prime Minister speak, about a more humane, people-centric, and a kinder globalization process, which is only going to be possible when we strengthen our multilateral system. Below that, we are also working in what we call the issue-based multilateral processes, whether it is the International Solar Alliance that we've both jointly launched, and we've got 80 countries in it, CDRI, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, the Alliance for Multilateralism, which is an initiative which France and Germany champion and which we are very strong and keen participants in. And then we've got the platforms like G20, where we are working to see how we can use those platforms to create a global governance architecture that is supportive of the vision of multilateral systems, multilateral order and processes that we all believe in. And when we speak of our international cooperation, there are obviously some regions that are going to become increasingly more important beyond Indo-Pacific in our conversations, in our common concerns. And it's going to be the periphery which lies to our west, which is the West Asia Gulf region. And that is also the periphery which lies to the east of France and Europe. We are also looking to have a deeper engagement with France in seeking a more comprehensive and robust engagement with Europe, because in some sense, we believe that we're working together, we can impart a great deal of strategic clarity and direction to India-EU partnership. And finally, it's going to be also Africa, which is again a region where we both have huge stakes, where we are seeing a great deal of geopolitical competition. And we feel that working together and with other like-minded countries, we can advance our common interests and the interests of the African countries over there. let me conclude by saying that all of this is not going to be just for the governments to do. It's going to be with the private sector. It is going to be with the digital sector. But even more, we've got to get more and more of our think tanks talking to each other. We've got to get more and more of parliamentarians engaging with each other. We've got to get more and more our students and interns working in each other's countries, because that's going to be the seed of the strength of our future partnership. Thank you very much, Ambassador Lenain and General Menon.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Ashraf. That was a majestic sweep in a very short time. And I must say that the power of conviction which you conveyed actually reflects what modern India is about, which is that it is hopeful for the future, that we believe that tomorrow and day after is going to be much better than yesterday. And I think that's the power which India actually carries in our head. So we are running short of time as usual, and we'll just take as many questions as we can, probably two of them. We've got just 4 minutes left. Aditya, could you please marshal?
Sure. I'm going to merge questions. Yeah, I'm going to merge questions. First, for the Ambassador of France, both Amanraj and Nitin Pai are asking broadly in the context of the recent patrol by two French Navy ships in the South China Sea. How does French policy on China square with the EU's overall position? And for the Ambassador of India, the question is basically, what can India and France do to expand the scale of their mutual trade? We can start with the Ambassador of France.
Okay, thank you. How does it square with the EU policy? Well, very well, because often France and Germany are the driving forces within the EU. And it's especially true on China. I mean, we've been the driving force to raise the relation between EU and China to a more strategic one. For long, we've been the EU has been not sufficiently organized towards China, playing more bilateral relations, very focused on business, and I would say strategically a bit naive. And for a few years, we've been working to have a more coherent, more strategic approach to China, acknowledging the different aspects of these relations. And finally, it's been summed up by the EU as China being in the meantime a rival, a competitor, and sometimes a partner. I mean, if you have a look to the issues, you see it can be a competitor for business. You see it can be a rival for strategic and for South China Sea and for many fields, and it should be a partner to tackle global challenges like climate. And that's really this joint global approach within the EU that we've been promoting and successfully. And that's the same sort of approach we have in mind now. We've been, as you know, as has been recalled, early promoter of the Indo-Pacific country in strategy. Many countries now have joined, and we really want now to do the same with Indo-Pacific. We want the EU to have an Indo-Pacific more formalized, more coherent strategy, and that's the goal. That's what we're doing now. We're campaigning, we're discussing with our partners, we're working a lot with Germany on this, with the Netherlands, and hopefully you will see some concrete operational strategic result by the first part of next year, which will happen to be also the time when France will hold the presidency of the EU. Thank you.
Ambassador.
Yeah, so the question is, how do we expand India-France trade? Well, let me be very specific. One, of course, is that we should seek some kind of early conclusion to the India-EU broad-based traded investment agreement. If not in its completion, we're trying to see if we can work out some early harvest on that. We've just had a conversation between Honorable Minister of Commerce and Industry and his counterpart in the EU. That will be the first stage because the regulatory environment is set in Brussels. But beyond that, we have to, of course, do all that we can to promote greater awareness and partnerships. Remember, we are both trying to recognize the risks of concentration which we saw during the pandemic, and also develop supply chain resilience as a result of that. So there are great opportunities to do that. We will be working to attract more French businesses and investment into India because it is part of a value chain. So more they do here, the more our trade will expand between us and what India can and France can do together in terms of expanding trade more broadly. Third is that we must recognize that this is the new European Union. After Brexit, there are new opportunities for Indian firms to come into Europe, because historically, we have almost reflexively, all our businesses have tended to go to be based in London, in UK. But that is a new world today. And I would say that France offers a great opportunity to be as a location for the European market, as also for North Africa, because it has everything. It has great infrastructure, great talent, great location, very high science and technology capacities, superb research institutions, and now a very, very positive business environment. In the course of the last 3 or 4 years, you've seen great tax reductions as well. So I think we have to not simply look at trade simply as a transaction of export and import, but in a larger economic picture, which must encompass trade, investments in both directions, and increasingly in the 21st century, data-driven collaborations. That is going to be the trends, the driver of economic fortunes here. So it's trade in goods, services, but also in what is the digital economy. So.
Thank you, and I'm afraid that we are out of time. So apologies for all those questions that are waiting. I see more than 24 questions which have been unanswered. But
we'll be happy to. If you send them to us, we'll be happy to answer them in writing. I did that once for 60 questions in a seminar. So
here they come. Yes, certainly.
We will happy to take it up, and you can then circulate it among those who have asked and the other listeners as well, participants.
Thank you for that generous offer. We'll certainly do that. And to just pick on one issue, which is echoed by both, which is that if it is the digital world which we have to deal with, we have to connect the young people of both the countries, because they are the millennials. They live in a different world than most of us. And if we don't connect them, we are missing an opportunity, because they are firstly all over both countries, but they are imbued with the spirit to do so much, don't have the opportunity. And I hope this sort of platform will make that possible. So on that note, I would like to thank Ambassador Emmanuel Lenain and Ambassador Javed Ashraf and our participants in this webinar. We hope that this is just a start to something much more deeper, fruitful going ahead. On that note, good night, au revoir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, you mentioned something that reminds me of a young Indo-French young man who's making electric cars in Bangalore. He is the son of an Indian father and a French mother. He lives in Delhi, but making cars in Bangalore. And 80% of his battery is developed in India. So that is a fine example of our youth connecting with each other. He's a big serial investor in the private equity market as well. So what you said, gentlemen, is absolutely right. There's a human side to the hard facts as well. Thank you. And thank you for this wonderful session. And I'm sorry we spoke too long and were not able to take on all the questions, but happy to answer them sincerely if you send them in writing.
Thank you
Now
once